Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tulio Suragusa with Dojo Live. Welcome. Today is Tuesday, July 28th, 2020. We have another guest that we're looking forward to speaking with. Let me introduce quickly my co-host. I have Carlos Ponce from just outside of Mexico City joining me, and Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, and I'm broadcasting from Los Angeles. Hi, guys. Welcome back.
Hi, Tulio.
Today we're talking with Danny May, who's the CEO of Lingmo, who's coming in just outside of Sydney, Australia. So we've got a pretty big presence globally here today on Dojo Live. And we're looking forward to talking with you, Danny. But before we do, let's get to know you a little bit. Maybe you could introduce yourself and let the audience know who Danny May is.
Thanks for having me. My name is Danny May. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Lingmo International. My background is, with Lingmo, we do language translation solutions for enterprises. But my background before entering Lingmo was I was a fully licensed plumber that found a need while I was traveling in the translation industry and pivoted my career from plumbing to tech entrepreneur.
How fun. Welcome to the technology industry, huh?
Thanks.
So tell us a little bit about Lingmo. What gave birth to this idea? What does the company do?
So how the idea come, as I mentioned in the earlier post, was I was a plumber and I was in China and I had my passport stolen and I downloaded an app at the time that was working in China. Went up to a police officer and said, "Hello, how are you?" into the app. It actually come out and translated, "Hello, I love you." So the officer wasn't impressed, had his hand on his gun and everything. And, long story short, from that's where, the idea of Lingmo come about because, the company that I used the software at the time was a big company. And, I just had the impression that everything was going to be right because they were a multinational company. So, I worked out where the issues went wrong in the translation, and we designed our own software, and this is where we are today. So we focus on our language translation in real time, whether it's speech recognition, text-to-text translation, or text-to-speech for enterprise companies to better communicate with their customers, especially during COVID-19. We've seen a lot of uptake in that because no one can travel and you've still got to communicate. So airlines, for example, still have to communicate, even though probably more so now with their customers to change flights and so on, and they all don't speak the same language.
Well, let's go right into it. I think it's a very timely topic and an important one at that. Kim, please introduce the show today and what we're talking about.
Sure. Thank you, Carlos. It's nice to meet you, Danny. So you kind of did it already. Today's title is Delivering Smarter Translation, where we're going to discuss how to make critical information available to the global audience, particularly during COVID-19. So one of the things that I understand about your product is that it's, of course, enterprise specific. And part of that is very specific vocabulary, right? That, let's say, the average person, even in our native language, might not be familiar with. So let's take COVID-19, for example, and medical terminology. Is that a good example of how you guys are able to close those gaps? Let's say that perhaps a non-specialized even translator would not be able to do.
Yeah, 100%. So that's where our artificial intelligence kicks in. So we can customize our solutions and train them to industry specific. So a good example is we've just partnered with a company called Unique, and they do a digital human assistant. So with that, we've added our language translation software to their digital human. And anyone can go there and ask questions about COVID-19. What's the best way to treat it? How do I have symptoms and everything? So you can do that in 4 languages. And we did have to, on our back end, train it because before coronavirus and COVID-19 wasn't even a word. So we had to go in and train it to learn COVID-19. So and then you've got, airlines and stuff that have their own terminology. It's medical. There's so many different industries. And when you have an interpreter or probably the best way is an interpreter, they're going to interpret the conversation in the business sense or in the terminology. And sometimes they may not even know the words for it. So, if you don't know the words or you don't know the meaning, how it gets translated onto the other end has a big ripple effect. It could be wrong, could be incorrect, and especially in business, that could be, a deal gone wrong, or in medical, it could be someone losing their life.
So I'm curious I have a couple of questions, but first I want to understand, how does this work? Who is the user? How is it delivered? And then I have a question about acronyms, but let's hold that off for a second.
Yeah.
How does this actually work? How do you deploy this solution?
So we've got a few different solutions that we have readily available. So we have one that's just gone live on Zoom chat, so you can chat via Zoom and they've got like a Slack version of Zoom, so you don't have to be on a call. You can have chats through the system. So right now we've just literally launched it today, or in Australia today. That you can speak multilingual across a Zoom chat. So that's one aspect. What we've tried to do is make it easily available to current solutions. So we have it available on WordPress, where you can do your website. We have it available for live chat. So and more so chatbots. It's a big thing with customer engagement now. A lot of companies are going to the chatbot side, so they can filter out all the easier questions to leave the harder questions for the live person. But when you're training a chatbot, you have to train in one language, because you've got to train the questions and then the answers. So what we've done is we've built our software to be able to go in front and behind each chatbot. So anyone can type in, say, Spanish. The chatbot only understands English. We do the translation, so then the chatbot gets the understanding of the question, performs the task, and it comes back in Spanish so the user can understand. So we really have our products available for enterprises to better communicate with their customers. That's pretty much the end line of all our solutions is, if a company can communicate better, that means they retain that customer. If they can't, then they'll lose that customer, and then their customer acquisition costs will go up, and it'll make it harder to retain customers, especially in today's climate. 12 months ago, you could have had an interpreter sitting next to you in a Zoom call interpreting for you, but now you can't because of COVID-19 and all that.
Wow, interesting. So September 1989, I started my career in tech. Gosh, it's 31 years coming up, guys. That's crazy. And it was in telecom. And we had, the company I was with had an acronym book literally this thick with so many different acronyms. Some of them were industry related, some of them were completely internal. So unless you kind of knew the acronym, you kind of got lost in the lingo a lot. And it's very common in that industry to use those acronyms. How does this apply for those kinds of challenges? You spoke about customizing translation. Is this part of the process of customizing, for example, in a chat where, if someone's talking to an airline, they have a language of their own too? How does that work? And what is that implementation? How long does that usually take?
It depends on the acronym and the industry specific words. And generally what we do is our software is really broadly trained across pretty much most industries. So you'll find, 75, 80% of the acronyms are already in the system. It's just those really, as you said, there's unique ones for specific companies that we have to train. So in that sense, when it comes to training, it's not just training in one language. We've got to train it in multiple languages, because we can't just assume people are going to, the end language is English. It can be from Spanish to French. So we've got to be able to train it across both sides. So that's where the timing sort of comes in. But, generally within a couple of months, we can train a big, you have that thick book, we can go through and train it. And then once we train it, the more it gets used, the better it gets. That's where the artificial intelligence really comes in.
Yeah, and my question was actually kind of along the line of the acronyms, and that has to do with something when I'm helping people and teaching English. A lot of the biggest questions that come up are idioms, right? People want to be able to use idioms in a native language, and they have a hard time understanding idioms when they're receiving them. And I know when you're in person to person, or when you're somebody who's more sensitive to what it's like to speak in a second language, or to be speaking with somebody whose first language is not your own language, we can be intentional, right? We can maybe try to avoid idioms and things like that. But when you're having these business interactions or in a chat bot, people are going to maybe not be as aware. So I'm assuming that idioms is also something that kind of comes up. So if you've got a customer service and somebody, I feel like my options are limited. Maybe they'll say, I feel boxed in, right?
Yeah.
How does your AI deal with the things that aren't literal?
So when it comes to the chatbot and the text side, it actually uses the keywords and puts it into literal understanding. So with the chatbot, for example, they've trained it to pick up certain words. So we translate and put in contextual understanding. So we did translation and put in contextual understanding to what language the chatbot is. But when you say for a live chat and so on, or even verbal, that's where the AI is, that's one of the things when we first started this, we were dabbling around in the AI. We did it a little bit, but then we really moved towards it heavily because it reacts so quickly and it actually trains it so much faster. So, for example, if you're using an idiom now, it may come out wrong, but you use it in 5 minutes' time, the exact same sentence, it's already picked it up and actually translates it correctly on the site. So it actually self-teaches itself. That's we've done this over the last 5 years. So as I said, it's really broadly trained, but it gets to that certain point where, nothing's 100%. So everything that we do, say with, our speech recognition, we tell our customers it's, above 85% accurate. We know it's, up near 90, 95, sometimes 100%, but there's so many variables that come into each time someone types a message. It could be spelt wrong, which we have auto correction on that. It could be in the speech recognition, background noise, someone mumbling, a dialect that's quietly, it's sort of a mixed dialect. It could be a bit of
right, like we're experiencing today.
Yeah, so it could be English.
Is it an American accent? Is it an Australian accent? Is it English?
Yeah, definitely. So there's so many different variables. So, that's what we say to our customers. Don't expect it 100% of the time. There's so many variables that go into it. So with the idioms, generally in most cases it trains itself and then picks it up. But then if there's a few times where it doesn't, that's where we go in and on the back end and have a play.
Danny, I got a question. We're speaking about making critical information available to global audiences especially during COVID. So if we focus on the critical information aspect, this is going to take me to my question, which is when we're dealing with critical information that is spoken, and specifically spoken, let's put the written part aside. When people are speaking, well, a great part of what you do is precisely you deal with voice recognition. Okay, so in that context, my question is this: how far deep down let's call it the technology or the engineering rabbit hole do you need to go in order to catch such subtle nuances and variations, like even the simplest thing, like, for example, intonation? There's probably, Kim, you probably know that when we're using English, depending on the intonation alone of a phrase, that's where the meaning is going to be based, right? So we can change the meaning.
Versus change the
meaning. Yeah, it's like
right.
It's like, for example, it's like, yeah, right. It's like against, yeah, right.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's a great question on tonality.
Right. Yeah, it's like, what sort of engineering challenges come in play in order to best catch these nuances and fluctuations and differences? I'm just curious. To whatever extent you can answer my question, but please.
You know what? I don't think I've ever been asked that question ever, which is it's surprising. Actually, I'm glad you asked that. There's so many. When you say yeah, right, and you really because it's a computer, it doesn't pick that up. It just says yeah, right. You can't have it as yeah, and it sort of extends it and then says right, so you can kind of understand. So there is a challenge in training that. But as you said, in say emergency sense and all that, the noises really, people don't understand the noises in the speech recognition really have effects. So not just the background noise, but if someone's we have it over a message service. We've got a message service that you can send messages in voice. If say I have a car accident and I've used that service to try and contact the ambulance in Mexico, so I don't speak Spanish, so I can send a message to them. If I'm yelling, I'm hurt and I'm yelling into the phone, it actually picks up the words different. So the tonal is really affects the outcome as well. So that's why, it's not just nuances, dialects, it's tonal, background noise. There's so many different variables that come into it. And that's where, we really work on that sense, because especially in a medical sense, if you're trying to communicate, whether it's face-to-face via, one of our apps, or if it's cross-border, or, a messaging service and stuff, we're really trying to work on, and, what really helps out, we've partnered with a New York company that does, that cuts out background noise. So that actually really helps with picking up the tonal as well. So, there's a lot of things that people just don't realize. You see a translation service on an app, or as our one as Enterprise, and there's a lot that actually goes into it.
So,
thank you.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So just to build on that a little bit more, I mean, I think tonality plays a big role in communicating, right? In different parts of the world, there's different ways of relating, So it sounds funny, but like when I lived in New York, people tend to be at least when I was there, were a little bit more sarcastic, a little more direct. That's not necessarily welcome, like in LA or on the West Coast, where it's a little more gentle, a little softer. It's just there's nuances and the differences in how people communicate with each other, and in some cases, being like sarcastic, like a New Yorker, many people will say that's just rude, right? Well, when you grow up there, you're like, that's not rude. That's just people relating to each other that way. But the reality is there's different tonalities that are appropriate in certain cultures versus others. In the Middle East, being direct and is more welcome than being all soft, right? So how do you compensate for those differences in terms of being a translation service that's available for all languages globally? How do you also weave in the tonality of how you translate information, which is a bit of a riff of what we just talked about, but I'm more curious about, is there anything like that that you put in, in the program, it says more direct, a little softer, or more sarcastic, a little funnier, whatever, that translates to relating to people in terms that are appropriate for that specific culture? Is that making sense, the question?
Yeah, it does. It does. So that's a hard one for us to train on the back end side, especially with the tone, with the tone. If you got someone in the Middle East yelling at you, you kind of know what is going to come out on the other end. They're yelling. Again, it's you kind of don't need to see what's on the screen, to know that they're angry at you. It's because it's going from a human to a machine back to a human. The machine is always acting as the machine. So in some aspects, it can be better because you've got someone yelling at you. When it comes out, it's actually calm, so you might not take offense to what's being said. So a classic example, what you said in New York, you may think it's rude, but when it comes out on the other end, whether it's face to face or cross border, it may not come out rude on the other end. So you go, well, okay, well, I understand what. So sometimes it can work in swings and roundabouts. So it can be you're not getting the effects which you need, but then the other side, you're not getting the effects, so you're not offended. Do you know what I mean? Because there is so many different in each language. There's so many different ways. I was in China and the Chinese guy was yelling at me. But he wasn't angry. He was just talking to me, and I'm sitting there, but when it comes through the machine, like through our software, and then on the other end, you go, okay, this is what he's saying. He's not actually angry. So it can work both ways. But it's really hard on the back end trying to teach a computer that you got the tonal and trying to pick up speech recognition, which picks up the each word and then translates contextually onto the other side. It's hard to if you've got someone yelling at you, it's hard to tell the computer they're angry or this is their language on the other end, so it yells at the translation to you.
Well, I mean, the minute you come out with a solution that's fantastic, we try to build more on it and make it more human as possible. That's good idea. So I get it. We're not there yet, and the technology isn't there. Who knows if it'll ever be there? But at some point, you just got to go with good enough, right?
Some people, don't want it to sound like a human. They want to actually know there's an interpreter and a robot in between, because if it sounds like a human, that's where people really get scared about artificial intelligence taking their jobs.
Mhm.
And it's what we do is, for interpreters and everything, we're not trying to take anyone's job. We're trying to enhance their experience and make their life easier. So when it comes out as a robot, people go, okay, it's a computer. I get that. But when, you've got these new products out that are, I've seen them live on Thingo, and it sounds like you're actually talking to someone on the phone that's a human when it's actually a computer. That's when people get angry, because they're misinterpreting, and it feels like they've been cheated.
Right. I think transparency is important. And I think to help avoid some of these cross-cultural misunderstandings, we could say, I think the more that we could layer up other cues, like maybe have it be video rather than just text, so that you can pick up on the nonverbal and see the facial expressions and understand this person looks confused or this person looks angry. I think I would counsel still that that's probably the best way to go, as close to a face-to-face interaction as possible, even with an interpreter in the middle. And if that interpreter happens to be a machine, I would say the experience is still better. Would you agree or disagree with that assessment?
No, I agree. People like to see someone talking, whether it's in their own language or a different language. It's just always, especially in a enterprise business sense, an email or a text or a chat can be misconstrued in so many different ways. You could read it and go, wow, this guy's really angry at me, or this girl's really angry. But then you call them up on the phone and you go, why are you so angry? And they go, no, you just misunderstood the email. So that's where the face-to-face or video interaction, you can see if they're angry or if they're just talking to you. So yeah, I agree. It is. It's just what we're working on is, it's not our software keeping up with the video and the latency. It's actually the network. So we're working with a couple of big European telcos or telecommunication company, and to work on trying to enable our system to the latency to be really dropped. Again, it's not our software, it's point A to point B. That's where the latency is. And, we've got it there. 3 years ago, we had it working on over a phone call, but it sounded like an old school international call where you're talking and the latency kicked in, and the next thing you know, you hear them or you hear the translation. So face-to-face is really, you feel like connected, but it's just about getting the latency done.
I think Kim's got a lot of great ideas. You might want to include her in the next round of product definition. As I was listening, I mean, a simple solution could be to just enable a number of like 4 emojis, right, where someone who's talking can respond, and then you validate what their mood is, so you can start to begin to understand. I mean, it could work. You never know.
Well,
So
we've partnered up with a company that actually, so with our chat side of it, that's they're based out of Irvine, and it actually comes up. So our system translates it in a live chat, and it comes up with suggested questions or suggested feelings of the people. So right now, it'd come up. I'd get a report on all of you, and it says, okay, talk about this or suggest this question and stuff like that. So we're starting to add that into our solution now as a value add, because some companies just don't, translation, again, they don't understand the context behind it, but we're adding value added services like this that will work seamlessly together, that allows their employees to talk to their customers, or even their employees talk to employees that they've only just met for the first time.
Brilliant. So how many languages are you supporting right now?
So we do 29 in voice and we do 80 in text.
Okay. So how do you go about programming the machine? You have translators that are reviewing text on an ongoing basis, making adjustment. How does the system learn and let you know when something's missing? Do you have some kind of a way to track that or audit that? How does that work now?
Yeah, so the way that we do it is, it's hard. 29 languages, we can't have staff speaking 29 languages, and we can't have staff for each language. So we generally outsource a lot of that. When I say outsource, what we do is we train it up to a certain level, then we actually get people in. So we'll use China, for example. When we had Chinese, we trained up to a certain level, then we got people inside China to go out and test it and provide their feedback, because we're getting real-time feedback in the worst case scenario, they're in the middle of Shanghai where there's noise everywhere, and they say this translation's awesome because it cuts the noise out, but it needs to work on this sort of tonal or these phrases more. That's what I found out. So we get real life experience from that. Then it comes back. We're working on the system now where with the enterprise side, they can generally what we tell them when they're coming on, especially when it comes to terminology and they're in their industry specific, it's about they try it out for say 4 weeks, and then if they say there's X amount of we need this word done, we go in and train it, because the AI really kicks in and starts picking up itself. So the artificial intelligence does a really good job. It's just a matter of we have people going out and testing individual languages, and we don't release a language unless it's a minimum 85% accurate across all board.
Interesting.
That's great. So we're coming up the end of our call today, and my question goes, you shared your personal story about losing your passport and an embarrassing translation. But now, as the years have passed and where we are right now, I would like to talk about the heart, I think, and the purpose of what your company is doing. I see this as something that's necessary, right? The world is more and more global every single day. And one of the things that we try to do here on our show is bridge those cultural gaps, being part of a multinational corporation ourselves. So what does this mean to you? What's the potential, and how important is this project to you and its implications for humanity? And
it's really important. I've had businesses in the past where you start a business for the money. This one was different. You started on a purpose of helping people, and having the feeling of being in China, not being able to communicate. Anyone that's been in a different country and can't communicate realizes how stressful it is, and they just want someone to be able to speak their language to help communicate. And that's really where it is. It's communication is kind of touching people's heart. If you can do that, then people feel more comfortable in going places or communicating. We want to really bridge that gap. It's everyone in the team. Lingmo feels the same way. We just want to be able to help people. And that's what we're doing. We partnered up with a company that helps. That's in an organisation in Europe that we give our software at cost price to them, because they use it to stop human trafficking, and that's what it's all about. Do you know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't think of human trafficking, but someone a young girl gets trafficked from Russia to the UK, but a UK person, or say a Russian. This company's in UK. The Russian person sees it. It's like another person sees it, tries to put the call into the UK government, but they can't speak the same language. That was where the language barrier was. So it's about helping people communicate, and then that's where we're really at. We the enterprise side, all that brings the revenue into us to do our philanthropy. We do the same thing with a Arizona company where we've given our software away for free for them, so they can help communicate with the homeless, because a lot of them are Spanish speaking and they can't speak Spanish. It's about giving, taking, so we can give back, and that's what we really want to do.
Lingmo, so that you never feel alone.
There you go.
That's anything that helps to bridge those gaps that exist between us is good in our book for sure. So congratulations.
Thank you.
We wish you a lot of success. It sounds like you're off to the races with it, and hopefully as you begin to evolve it, maybe, who knows, it will have the ability to show attitude when you have to respond to someone.
I'll work on that now. I'll work on that.
Something like that. But it's been great to have you with us, Danny. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for everyone who tuned in. We love our audience. Thanks for making it possible for us to continue to do this and bring you this content. Please continue to chime in and participate. And Carlos, we got one more show on Thursday this week.
We do. We have on Thursday at 1 p.m. U.S. Pacific, we're going to have Manoj Agarwal, the CEO and co-founder of Show Day, which it's a platform for motivation and engagement and connection and alignment of employees. So at companies, I mean. So that's who we're going to be having, and we're going to be speaking about powering businesses with people motivation. So let's see what this is all about. So it looks very promising and interesting. That's on Thursday, 1 p.m. Pacific, right here on Dojo Live. And also, of course, the next following Monday, we're going to have the recap show, which we're going to be recapping this conversation with Danny. So please, folks, stay tuned and join us also on Monday, 1 p.m. Pacific, for the recap show.
Stay safe, everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Danny,
you.
just stay
Bye.
with us as we